The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, in my mind, has moved away from just being a massive waster of Canadian taxpayer money to being flat out thieves of Canadian taxpayer money. I'm not sure if you heard, but the CBC recently canceled its New Year's broadcast in order to try and help make up for a $129 million budget shortfall that they're experiencing. I guess this saves us all from having to watch Rick Mercer. Not that any of us really watch the CBC, but now we don't have to accidentally see a clip of his on social media. But it's quite pathetic that they can't even host something that they've done every single year because they're supposedly running out of money. And now you might be asking yourself, well, did the Liberals and NDP cut their budget? I don't think so. They obviously support the CBC a lot. And you'd be correct, their budget from taxpayer money has not been cut. They somehow are experiencing a budget shortfall because, unsurprisingly, their content sucks so much they can't even get advertisers to pay them money for commercials, or at least they can't get them to pay nearly as much as they used to. So the $129 million budget shortfall has nothing to do with government support. The government support's been going up every year. They're going to be getting $1.3 billion next year, and somehow they still can't pay for everything. And it really does demonstrate just how subpar and liberal leaning the content has become. It was just a few months ago that the CBC had to admit that their target of 4.2% of the Canadian media market that they were hoping to capture in viewership was too high. And I believe that they had re-estimated it for next year down to only 3.8% of the market. That is insanely low. And it's because nobody watches their content. I know I already said that, but you can't put too fine a point on it. It's not that, oh, social media is taking over the news space and people don't want to watch traditional media anymore. If you go down south, American news networks are not having a problem still attracting millions of people watching them every day. The CBC, relative to American news outlets, actually has about the same operating budget in terms of proportion. They're about 8 times as big as us, and the CBC is about an eighth of the budget that CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News would have. And they still can't make a go of it. And they're trying to claim it's because we're just so altruistic. We're just trying to do all this great francophone content for people who live outside of Quebec, and we're trying to do northern content for those who live in the territories, and it just costs so much. These people are not spending in order to benefit you. They actually spend money to benefit themselves. The CBC's own reporters had to comment on the fact and go after their CEO because they're still trying to hand out bonuses to executives as well as on-air personalities and other people who work at CBC, despite the fact that they're literally cutting 10% of their workforce. They are cutting 600 employees and non-union workers. Obviously, you can't get rid of the union workers because for some reason, job security should be of highest priority in media, not good content, job security. So here's the clip of their own reporter actually having to grill the CEO, who just has no good answer for why they're still potentially going to dole out, I think it was like $12 million in bonuses. You could have kept a lot of those people employed. I don't think any of them should stay employed because I think the CBC should be wiped out as an institution, but I'll get back to that after the clip.
I'm just curious about something. I'm going to presume no bonuses this year. I mean, the Canadian Taxpayer Federation said a Freedom of Information request showed 16 million were paid in bonuses in 2022. Can we establish that that is not happening this year?
It's too early to say where we are for this year. We'll be looking at that like we do all our line items in the coming months.
So there's a chance bonuses could still happen at a time when jobs are being cut?
I'm not going to comment on something that hasn't been discussed at this point. So,
okay.
Good job for the CBC reporting on themselves, but I don't think this should even be happening in the first place. That is blatant theft. If the CBC is experiencing a budget shortfall and they are getting $1.3 billion in Canadian taxpayer money, I think Canadian taxpayers should expect that they should be cutting things that they do not need. I think that Catherine Tate, the CEO of CBC right there, she could take a pay cut if she was actually really dedicated to having a good, healthy public broadcaster, but they're cutting programming, not good programming, I'll give you that, but they're cutting programming while still trying to give out bonuses. They could be cutting salaries from executives, from on-air personality, if they were actually caring about keeping these other people employed, but they don't. They're just taking taxpayer money and they're trying to find the most efficient way to give it to liberal friends who work for them as humanly possible. That's just theft. I'm not one of those guys who says all taxation is theft. I think that's silly. But at the point where you're just simply taking Canadian taxpayer monies to pay out to people who are not even doing their jobs, that's blatant theft. And the Liberal argument for the CBC, and they're going to be deploying this a lot in the next federal election, is that the CBC is a heritage institution and we can't get rid of them because they're just, it's just part of the Canadian culture that the CBC exists. I want to look up how long they've existed. Sorry for not doing my homework before this. I believe that they've been around since when 1936, probably about when I was about to guess. They've been around since 1936, and it's quite rich that the Liberals constantly defend the CBC as a major part of Canadian heritage, while they say nothing about protesters, Antifa morons running around pulling down statues of John A. Macdonald and Queen Victoria, renaming streets, not saying a word when old churches are being burnt down. These people could care less about Canadian heritage. They just like the CBC because it gives a subtle left-wing biased take on the news that shuffles people into voting for the Liberals. Not so left-wing that they might vote NDP, just enough that they'll keep the establishment government in their place. There's a reason why why older voters, 65 plus voters, tend to vote Liberal disproportionately to the rest of the population. It's because they watch legacy media like the CBC. And for that matter, all legacy media, CTV, Global, Toronto Star, all these organizations, these failing, crappy media organizations, I do a better job just filming random opinion videos like this than they do on their own broadcasts. There's just no quality, bad coverage, obvious Liberal narratives. They shouldn't be getting a single dime of Canadian taxpayer money, just as I shouldn't get a dime of it. I don't deserve your money, and the CBC definitely doesn't either. And what I wanted also, the CBC is not some sort of key part of Canadian heritage. It's only a good part of Canadian heritage as long as it respects that heritage and at least attempts to actually fulfill its role. Neutral, unbiased media, especially in areas where they can't afford to sort of support journalism. Yeah, like in communities in the north, I'm fine with that. There's only a couple thousand people who live in a town, and the CBC can subsidize some local journalists to do coverage that we usually wouldn't be able to get enough money to support. Fair enough. They've not done that. Watch any stupid CBC gem show. Not that you should. Your eyes will bleed if you attempt to. You watch any news broadcast. It's nonsense. It's pablum. Me and Daniel Boardman, he usually does the worst of the CBC series. And when I guested with him one time to watch the CBC with him, in a 45-minute broadcast, they did the same stupid story 5 times because they can't even their own CBC The National, the 45-minute news segment plus commercials, cannot somehow do any original journalism. They have 3 stories that they just keep whacking away on, constantly putting out left-wing narratives and not even covering the story correctly on a factual level. It's horrible. These people don't deserve a budget. They should be flat out defunded. Anyone who defends the CBC should be mocked. And the CBC was not always bad. They used to actually be able to deliver at least something that Canadian taxpayers, I don't think taxpayer dollars should be going to media in the first place, but at least taxpayers could at least feel like at least it's not being completely wasted. Maybe it's not legitimate that they're taking our money and putting out any content. It should be private. But they used to do good stuff. I have a prop right here. I love their rendition of the Mikado. This was done in the 80s, though. I can't find you anything in the last decade that the CBC's done that I'm proud of as a Canadian. It's not. Why should I feel prideful that there are bloated crown corporations existing in Canada? Do you look at the DMV in your community and are prideful about it? No, it's a badly run institution that I don't care about. I want good institutions, and the CBC is not one of them. The thing is that too is that the CBC has completely inversed what it usually is to be a public entity, because even though it's going to say it's a private entity and they sometimes generate their own private money, not really. It's all off the back of Canadian taxpayer money. It's effectively a public institution. Public employees should be generally not as well paid as private employees, but they get a little bit of a better pension and it's a stable job. The CBC is one of yet a litany of public institutions where everyone gets paid massive salaries that are bigger than private institution salaries. They get fat pensions, and they can never be fired unless, like the CBC, they fire their own non-unionized employees in order to keep giving themselves bonuses for themselves and all the unionized employees. It's just completely incestuous. This needs to be stopped. And I do not feel bad about any of these people who end up losing their jobs to the CBC. You don't deserve to be subsidized to play bad, like to, pretend to be a journalist. It's just not something that I care about at all. Anyways, that should be it for me today. I have my usual donation link for my legal fund in the description of this video. I'm being sued by a billionaire because myself, the National Telegraph, and our guest writers do good reporting, and we will defend them. I'm $25,000 deep into defending us, so just chipping in any money really helps me out. And then I also want to mention that I'm running for the Calgary Signal Hill Conservative Party nomination. So if any of you live in that riding and know someone who lives in the riding, make sure you or they have a Conservative Party membership and vote for me #1 on the ballot. I don't know when the nomination date's going to be, but probably within a year. So all you probably need is a 1-year membership. And, other than that, always make sure you know which riding you live in. I know a lot of people in this country who do not know what their electoral district is, and that's a little scary because it means that you're going to be far less effective at engaging in politics. So even if you don't live in the city of Calgary, make sure you can name your riding. Even just comment which riding you live in the description of this video or this comment section. I want to make sure that people are paying attention and they are active enough that they can actually stop bad candidates who are running for nominations in their area, or they know which ward or provincial riding that they live in, so they know if it's a riding that really needs help to be taken back from the Liberals and the NDP, or it's an area where we could be, you could be getting on an EDA and you could be potentially pushing forward good policy for party AGMs. Make sure that you're engaged, because if you're not engaged, you can't complain that the country's going down the toilet. Other than that, I hope everyone has a great day. Sorry for the rant. It's just my style.